My mind keeps going back to those pictures of me as a little boy. And I think there probably are times where I think, and I know it's not possible, but I think, would it be possible for me to go back and be that little boy again? Because we all lose our innocence. Everybody loses their innocence. But when you've been through such a dark tunnel like this, when you've seen the darkness of life, the depravity of humanity, when I've seen my own depravity, sexual, otherwise, there is a desire to go back and be that little boy again, and to recapture that part of you that wants to dream for the future, that wants to experience life. Because there's a lot of life that I missed out on going through this. I mean, a lot of just wonderful exploration and getting to know life and people in a normal way that I totally missed out on because of this, because of the path I went down. I grew up far too fast. And this kind of life makes you grow up very, very fast. And you grow old very fast. Too fast. And there's so much of life that I wish I could go back and experience and capture. But it's gone.
Hello, my name is Casey Winters and I'm a former homosexual. The video presentation you're about to watch contains frank and medically explicit discussions about some tragic consequences of homosexual behavior. Some of this material will not be suitable for some viewers, particularly children, so please be forewarned. During the next 25 minutes, you'll hear from those who've lived the homosexual lifestyle, as well as from the experts in medical and mental health fields. And although some of you may find some of these segments disturbing, please know that our intent is not to shock or offend, but to raise real-life issues, issues that are often ignored in the cultural debate concerning homosexuality, but issues that must be dealt with honestly and openly by mature and thoughtful adults.
If I had known where that was going to take me, if I had known the things that was going to lead me into, I would have never gone to that bar that night. And so Tim and I ended up at that bar, and I got to tell you, from a human perspective, it was probably one of the most exciting experiences I had ever had. I walked into that nightclub that night, and the lights were flashing, and the music was blaring, and man, it looked like everybody was having a really good time. And that was the hook. That was the hook that got me, and unfortunately, that was the hook that kept me there. I had never thought about homosexuality, had never thought about whether it was right or whether it was wrong or what the consequences might be. All I was thinking is, man, if this is where the happening crowd is, if this is where the cool crowd is, well, that's where I want to be. And I can look back now and I can see how the stage was set. Not all of it by my own choices or even by my own actions, but looking back at the first time that I was exposed to pornography, I think probably 5th or 6th grade, where I was on the school bus and somehow or another one of the boys had gotten a hold of what really was a sex manual. And then, you know, I got involved with a group of boys that were bringing penthouses and Playboys apparently out of their home. I think all of that just kind of built up for me a real curiosity that I suppose eventually would have developed anyway, but really was developing too quickly, too soon. And then of course I was in a situation with a young boy where this curiosity I think got the best of me, and we were wrestling around in my bedroom, and I began to grab at him, and one thing led to another, and we ended up in a fondling situation. So I think my relationship with girls even kind of got short-circuited. that when I should have been learning how to relate to girls, you know, what's it like to have a girlfriend, and what does that mean, and how do you talk to girls, that was all short-circuited because I went from pornography to girls being a sexual object. And I didn't like that. It was uncomfortable for me. And so when it came time to eventually go to that homosexual bar and be introduced to homosexuality, well, I was already in the mindset of being open to sex, even though I had not particularly thought of homosexuality. I was open to the idea of sex, and I was open to the idea of a relationship being based on sex. When we went to the bar, I wasn't thinking about having sex with Tim or anything like that. And when we left the bar, I suppose I was naive, but even when we left the bar, I really didn't know until the moment we were sitting on that couch and he started to unbutton my shirt. There's no doubt Tim was the aggressor. And I do have to say that I have thought many times, what if Tim had not introduced me to that situation? But in the back of my mind, I always wonder, had this older fella, had he not brought me into the situation, perhaps my life would have been different. And so that led for me what ended up being an 11-year involvement in the homosexual community. And the longer I was there, the more I developed a new identity. And this new identity was the identity of being a gay young man. And the longer I stayed there, the more that identity fit.
Generally, a person enters into homosexuality gradually. A lot of the people I've talked to say that they knew they were different even at age 5 or 6. Began, you know, generally around puberty to feel same-sex attractions. And, you know, kind of gradually, maybe initially through pornography, maybe some boyhood experiences with other guys in the neighborhood, began to get into it.
It's not an identity. No one's born this way. No scientific data. None whatsoever. You come and show me. I'll eat it. I've read all the studies. People will say, oh, well, you know those studies? I say, yeah, have you read those studies? Anybody with Research 101 can debunk those studies. They're so flawed.
When I hear somebody say, well, I've known that I was gay since I was 4 years old, you know, I have to step back and ask myself, wait a minute, what does a 4-year-old know of sexuality? You know, unless they've been molested or unless they've been exposed to pornography, unnaturally exposed to human sexuality, 4-year-old doesn't think in those concepts. And so I think what happens is we develop this identity and then we attach it to curiosity experiences we have when we were younger, and we make that one long continuum, and we come to the conclusion, oh, I've always been this way, when in fact early on it had nothing to do with being a homosexual or being gay. Most of the relationships I entered into to get what I wanted. And most of them were quick, short, and superficial.
I never had the long-term monogamous committed relationship that I thought I was called to. And even though I appeared to be quite well adjusted, I was very lonely. Even though I was surrounded by lots of friends and lots of activities and, you know, church and sports and on and on and on, I just was still very lonely.
So I believe that committed same-sex relationships is a myth, and that there are a couple of highly publicized examples that the gay community uses. But in every town I've been into, and especially in my private practice, that's an illusion.
And regarding the longevity of homosexual couples, a homosexual couple themselves did a study. One's a psychiatrist, one's a psychologist, Madison and McWhorter, reported in '84, the male couple. They studied 156 couples, 95% infidelity rate, 95%. And a German psychotherapist who's also homosexual, Dr. Martin Dannecker, in '91 did a study of 900 men over a year period of time who were in committed relationships, 83% infidelity. So Madison and McWhorter stated themselves, the norm of homosexual relationships is infidelity, and the norm of heterosexual relationships is fidelity.
I became Tim. I became the aggressor, and I became the one that was using other people to satisfy myself. Anonymous sex with multiple partners and orgies, going to adult bookstores and performing sex acts on literally men that I would never see their face. You know, you hear so often from people the gross things and all the orgies and the parties, and you hear the response, well, that's just a small percentage. That's just no, it's not. That's the homosexual community. For the young homosexual male, the early involvement in sexuality is, dare I say, pain-free. It's not pain-free, in fact, but you know, it's consequence-free. And you don't see that it's doing anything to you. That's the attraction to the homosexual lifestyle, particularly for men, is that, wow, I can have all the sex I want, readily accessible to me, almost any time I want it, and there's no consequences. No babies to worry about, no abortions to worry about, just good fun. That, of course, is the deception, and of course, AIDS shattered that deception.
It's been reported that 30% of 20-year-old homosexual men will either have HIV or be dead of AIDS by the time they're age 30. The alarming aspect of that report is that I think 30% is probably too low. I think as homosexual practices gain more acceptance and as even they are encouraged, we are going to see that percentage increase dramatically. And that's just simply a fact that doesn't have to take place.
The homosexual lifestyle, because it tends to have more than one partner and multiple partners, puts homosexuals at a particular risk for disease exposure, not because of the 8 or 10 partners they may have had in the previous year, but because of the hundreds of men they may have exposed themselves to because of those 10 men.
Men are going out and having sex with men so frequently. 80% of homosexual men will have a sexually transmitted disease. That's not being portrayed on Will and Grace and Ellen. It's all made to look so plush and so kitsch and so sweet and so nice.
A particular concern to the homosexual male is anal intercourse. Anytime you're having multiple sexual experiences inside the anus, there's a potential for damage.
That's a very vascular area, and when a tear takes place, there can be bleeding. If there's bleeding into that area and there's an open area in the bloodstream, in the circulation, the fecal material that is sitting there in the rectum certainly can enter the bloodstream.
The human papilloma virus, or HPV, which is usually seen in the genital area because of penile anal intercourse, is often transmitted to the homosexual in the perianal area. That's a risk not just to the perianal area but also to the colon itself. And homosexuals who have exposed themselves to perianal warts have an incidence of colorectal cancer and other cancers of the colon which exceed the general population. Other diseases like hepatitis A and hepatitis